Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk.
Hello. Hello.
Look at us. We're here. We're functioning.
We're
awake. We're alive. We're dressed. I have on sweats as usual, though.
You know what? The pants were on the floor next to the bed, so...
Easy peasy.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. And it's fucking cold today, so...
It is cold today.
I was like, I know I have a sweatshirt.
I would have had time to do yoga outside, and I was like, no. I can feel the cold air without opening the door. I'm not going out there.
Forget it's not frigid, but I'm like...
Well, at least it's not fucking hurricane winds anymore.
No, those
I was so done with Friday. We tried to sit outside because it's like 80-something degrees. Denver set a record for the day. And I just looked at Jeff and I was like, I can't do this anymore because it was just wind, constant wind. I can't handle it. So we went back inside.
It was very anxiety producing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because, our state's on fire.
Yes, and I was behind somebody at a light last night who still threw their cigarette out the window despite us having wildfires already all over the place in April. Our big fire season is usually, for people who don't know, June to like November or something like that, June to October. I know it starts in June, though. That is hardwired into my brain at this point, at least around us here.
I advocate bringing back public flogging for people who throw lit cigarettes out the window.
I've never understood it. Even when I was a smoker, I kept an Altoids tin, and I put them out in that, and then I had another one that had the fresh ones in it so that I could stuff them in my coat and not squish them.
Cars have these things called ashtrays.
Yeah. Do the new ones? Even if they don't.
I'm driving a 2006 minivan. Yeah. I don't know.
So, well, I don't even think I have ashtrays in my 04 Jeep. But my point stands that you can have something in your fucking car to put out your cigarettes instead of throwing them out, which is nasty anyway, and kills birds and kills animals and all that bullshit. But also, we live in a fire state. We're in constant drought and constant fire danger. And this year, we never stopped our fire season this year.
Because it was so dry.
Yes. Boulder had the big fire. There were fires everywhere. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it really irritated. I wrote a horror story about it, if you'll recall.
Yeah, I do. I recall that
because
story.
I literally followed somebody home, picked up their fucking cigarette butt, followed them home, walked up behind their car when they parked, flicked it into their yard, and walked away.
Did you really?
Yes, I did. Because we lived through a terrifying and traumatic experience with Waldo Canyon, and these assholes are out there throwing their cigarettes out their car windows.
And they can't be unaware. I mean, everybody's talking about the fires.
But they don't. But even if you're the type that does that, it's like a litter thing anyway. I mean, it's no matter what, it's disrespectful. It's disgusting.
It is.
And take care of your shit. I don't care if you smoke. Just take care of your shit. If a teenager can take care of her shit, you can take care of your shit.
Yes.
I don't care if you stop listening because I have strong opinions on it.
Clean up after yourself.
Honestly. But yeah, I'm just like, we had grass fires all over the city the day I saw it. Mm-hmm. The city. Like, they had to shut down Great Wolf Lodge and Shields and all that stuff on a busy
Friday.
Urban road, and
now fortunately that one didn't last very long. They were able to get right on it and knock it down, but
there was something over off Fillmore Hill.
That was while I was gone, but yeah,
because
we're talking that one's closed down.
Places around us right here. So yeah, I'm not happy about it. No. And we didn't get the beetle killed trees taken down at our cabin last year because of the tractor issues, and so we haven't even started that. And I'm watching the mountains, the Sangre de Cristo mountains in New Mexico are on fire. We're in the Sangres in Colorado. So I'm just like watching that right now.
Spring.
I guess it was nice to have a cabin for 2 years.
Spring used to be about, rebirth and the trees budding and flowers blooming.
Well, this year
it's about shit catching on fire.
Yeah. Fire season. We're here.
Just starting earlier and earlier.
Or not ending ever. Yeah. So There you go. I did get to go meet my grand godbabies yesterday for the first time, even though they're like, I'm not going to do the math. They were born in September and October, and it's April. So
let's say 6
months. Yes, they're adorable. So happy.
Cool.
Such happy babies.
Good.
Yeah, it was nice. There's some baby time in. I should say for the record, I really disliked babies for a while, so I'm glad I passed that. I don't want one. It's not like I'm there. I'm not talking. I don't want grandchildren either. So, but yeah, now I was like, oh, they're actually very relaxing. But I was sitting there last night and I was like, why are my ribs and my arms so tired? Well, I'm not going to put their names out on here, but one's a little boy, one's a little girl. And I'm telling you, she's just bouncing. So I held her and she wanted to stand and bounce. Like I did that for an hour and a half. And so I was like, I got to work out. It's okay that I didn't do yoga today because I worked my ribs and my arms.
Yes, you did.
My core.
I thrifted yesterday. Oh. All day.
All day.
Like,
sounds like fun for you.
It was. I went with a couple of friends. It was a whole lot of fun. Good. One of whom is a big fan of ours, so
nice.
She'll hear this and go, "Wee!"
Did you go out to lunch or anything?
Yeah, of course.
Did you go anywhere interesting?
We went to is it called Elephant Thai? It's on Academy. It used to be Saigon Springs.
Okay.
And now it's a Thai restaurant. Okay. It's not as good a Thai restaurant as it used to be a Vietnamese restaurant. But it wasn't bad. It was good. And we were all, because by the time we got to lunch, it was like 2:00. My God, we wiped out the arc. We were there for a long time. I tell you, it was a very close thing. Amy almost bought a bullhorn, which is like me buying a bullhorn. It's
I'm like, why do you need this?
Completely unnecessary. But it was only $15. But she did not buy it. We saw, and it was funny because this woman picked it up. She's looking at it, and Amy's like, "Damn, she got there first." And she put it down. And this happened a couple of times. Somebody would come up, pick it up, look at it, think about it, and put it down. And finally, a woman came up and bought it.
Did you find anything bizarre that would be worth posting on that Facebook page that does?
I did not.
Weird vintage finds.
I did not. I have to take some stuff back because I didn't try stuff on there. Oh. So I was like, no. There's stuff that looks really hideous on, but nobody wants to see a picture of that. Look, these pants are too small. Isn't that funny?
Look at this. Isn't this great? Check it out. We went to Colonel Mustard's for lunch, and I had I've been there multiple times. It's great. Because you can there's an array of mustards you can get. There's spicy mustards and sweet mustards and everything mustards. So yeah, like Jeff got a garlic aioli.
Ooh.
And I did the vegan black bean burger though. That was the first I've tried that. They have like a veggie wrap. I got that last time I was there. It's super good.
Have you tried the mustard ice cream?
Yes.
And you've probably told me how
good. I mean, that's the thing. I could never eat a whole cone of it. They sell it. You can get it in a cup. I don't know if they can get it in a cone, but you can get the mustard ice cream. And it's surprisingly good, though. The flavors work together. And they give you a little dish to try, a little cup, like a medicine cup.
Yes.
And put a little pretzel in there and a little spoon. And you get it's like 2 bites of ice, but it's good 2 bites. I could never eat a whole thing.
Like the little sample cups you get when you go to the frozen yogurt place.
Yeah.
If any frozen yogurt places still exist.
They do.
Do they? I don't. Because obviously they...
Not TCBY.
Well.
Which is the only original name one I can remember because it was the original. Yes.
There's Froyo out east. I think it's called Froyo.
It's not very original because people just call that Froyo. But okay.
Yeah, and now I'm like, or maybe it's something that sounds like Froyo. I don't know. We drove by it yesterday. I was like, is the frozen yogurt place still here? Yes, it is. Do you want to stop and get some? No, I just needed to know that it was still there.
I realized we used to take the kids to one of those places where they have all the ice cream, like soft serve machines or whatever. And then you go through and get all your toppings and weigh it at the end. And we haven't done that in years now.
I love that. Because I load it up. I love getting because it's quite tart, the frozen yogurt. And I get all the fruit on it. And of course, then I top it with like peanut butter cups. So it could possibly be healthy until I fuck it all up.
Until you do that.
Until I do that.
Well, I have a super long story today, so maybe we...
Okay, so do you want to start with the super long, or do you want me to start with the shorter one?
Like, I realize none of them are good, but this one is the worst of the worst. Do you enjoy going to the grocery store? If so, this message is not for you. But if you're like me and procrastinate going to the store, Instacart is a fantastic option to ensure you no longer have to. Save yourself a trip and go through Instacart, where you can get a delivery through a personal shopper in as little as 1 hour. My experiences have been great so far, with my personal shopper texting me before substituting another product, letting me know when they were on their way to my house, and letting me know it had been delivered, all via text. If you click on our affiliate link in the show notes or on our website, you get free delivery on your first order over $35, and you help out our show at the same time. It's the perfect time to give it a try. So I'm going to hand out a trigger warning right now.
All right. Am I going to be crying by the end of this?
This is a really terrible story, but I feel like her story needs to be told repeatedly, so it doesn't get forgotten that things can go this way. And so this is about the torture of a teenage girl. And not by who people would expect, which is part of why I think it's important to tell her story. So this is disturbing. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is the case of Sylvia Marie Likens, who, if anybody, it's the real girl next door. There's a book and there's movies and there's all kinds of movies about this with different names because it's just absolutely horrifying. And it's still considered Indiana's most disturbing and infamous crime. Jack Ketchum, maybe you recognize the girl next door. Jack Ketchum wrote a book and it was one of the most horrifying and disturbing books I've ever read. And that's not considered like extreme horror. Yeah, there's Jack Ketchum mug up there. He's a really good writer if you guys want a horror writer.
You know, I've been avoiding that book.
You might want to continue. I'm not sad I read it.
Right.
He's a great writer. He was a great writer. But it's deeply disturbing and horrifying. It got to me. Like, it has stuck more than any other book I've read. And guys, I read a lot of horror, just to be clear. And I went through the splatterpunk phase, and I went through... There's some extreme horror now that I've decided I'm not going to go ahead and dive into that. Maybe I'm too old for it. Maybe I've reached a point where I don't need to do that anymore. I would have read those in my 20s. Anyway, the book was called The Girl Next Door. Like I've said before, there is a movie about it called that, and then there are movies under different names that are out there. And the book, he took it and he told it from a neighbor boy's point of view, and it's about this teenage girl being tortured in the house next door, and basically his helplessness to do anything about it once he figures out what's going on. But it was based on a real life crime. So it's intense and deplorable. But it is an important story to tell. And again, I think it does her injustice not to tell her story. So the real life victim was Sylvia Marie Likens. She was born January 3rd, 1949 in Lebanon, Indiana. She was the middle child of 5 kids and the only one who wasn't part of a set of twins. So her 2 younger siblings were twins, her 2 older siblings were twins. I think it was both boy, girl. Her parents were concessionists for carnivals, so they would travel. And whenever they traveled, they would take the 2 older siblings and they would take the younger brother, and then the Sylvia and her little sister Jenny, who had polio and she wore a metal leg brace and everything. They would leave them with whatever relatives or friends would keep them while they were gone for this time, to make sure that they could still go to school and finish through that and everything. I don't know why it was considered less important for the little brother to get school. The older 2 might have been done. So Sylvia was very protective of her little sister Jenny, and they were really close. And that makes sense because they would be together when everybody else was gone. Sylvia was always described as a delightful girl. She was sweet and confident. She loved the Beatles and music in general. She performed odd jobs, and she gave a portion of her income to her parents to help because they weren't... Being a concessionist for a carnival isn't a way to get rich.
I wouldn't think so, no.
So they didn't have a lot of money, and so she tried to help when she could. So she would babysit, and she would go do cleaning for people, and she would do all that stuff, and she would give them bits of it. And she was also, she was a lovely little girl, and that's part of what happened to her. That's part of the reason, because she was pretty and because there was jealousy involved. In June 1965, their parents had split up, and the mother got arrested for shoplifting, and she was sentenced to prison time for it. And her father got an offer for a job that would help them financially, and so he boarded them with a woman named Gertrude Banishevsky, a single mother of 7 children that ranged in age from 1 year old about to 17. She had been in several abusive relationships. She'd been married officially twice, and once common law, it said. I've learned more about that now, so who knows if it actually was common law, because we call common law things that aren't. And anyway, she had first gotten married at 16 and started having kids. So I think she was about 37 when all of this went down. Not old. Sylvia was 16 at the time, Jenny 15. They knew 2 of Gertrude's daughters from school. The Likens agreed to pay $20 per week for the girls to board there. And just for reference, maybe that doesn't sound like much, Gertrude's rent was $55 a month.
Oh, wow.
So $20 a week takes care of some shit.
Yeah.
Now, I saw that $55 a month in several places, so I don't know if it's true or not, but we're talking 1965, so who knows? And the plan was that Dad would be back in November and collect the kids. The first couple months went okay, with the girls having fun together, doing chores, attending church with their host family. Though Jenny would later report that the beatings started within 2 weeks of them arriving at the house, it didn't get bad until later. In August, the payments became irregular, and Gertrude grew angry at their lateness. For example, the first time she really lost it and beat the 2 girls, the rent check on the day that the rent check was due, or the boarding check was due, she said, "I took care of you for no reason." And she beat them with a thick paddle, but a lot, just to be clear. This wasn't a couple whacks. And the check arrived the next day. So the Likens were having the financial issues, and so it was spotty, and they would be a couple days late or whatever. While both sisters got paddled, Gertrude focused increasingly on Sylvia, the older sister. It's thought she was jealous of the lovely young woman's looks and likely her confidence, because people had said, she was confident in herself. It's not like she walked around going, "I am gorgeous." She just was a woman a girl woman who exuded that certain kind of confidence. I imagine intelligence looks that way to certain people, right? So, in addition, she would try to protect her sister, bringing the beatings around to herself to spare Jenny, which probably amplified it and pissed off Gertrude more. Gertrude started making Sylvia eat only leftovers from the garbage. And really what she was doing, she just stopped feeding her. She wouldn't let her eat. And so Sylvia would have to dig through the garbage to get some food. And then the beatings would increase. When Sylvia mentioned having a boyfriend at one point, Gertrude kicked her in the crotch. Her oldest daughter, Paula, who was 17, 3 months pregnant with a married man's child, joined in, shoving Sylvia off the chair and telling her, "You ain't fit to sit in a chair." There's also said to have been jealousy between the two and possibly animosity even before the girls stayed there because they were going to school together. They told her she was a prostitute and they kept mocking her. Basically, they were calling her a slut. Gertrude continued kicking Sylvia in the genitals throughout the months of torture and telling her she was a whore, telling the kids that this is what you don't want to be like her other kids, she's a slut and she's whoring around. And just for the record, folks, Sylvia was a virgin. And it's not, she wasn't dating, she wasn't hanging out with boys other than the boys in the household. At one point, she forced Sylvia to strip in the living room in front of several neighborhood boys and masturbate with a glass soda bottle. This would not be the last time she made Sylvia do this. The house was a frequent gathering place for other kids in the neighborhood, and a couple of the neighbor boys and girls would end up taking part in Sylvia's torment as well. A boy named Randy Lepper came over for dinner one night and helped Gertrude and Paula force-feed Sylvia an overloaded hot dog, covered in tons of condiments, ketchup, and all this stuff, and she vomited it up, and they made her eat her vomit.
Oh, my God.
At one point, Sylvia was accused of spreading a rumor at school that Paula and Stephanie were prostitutes. 15-year-old Stephanie came home and hit Sylvia, but the two made up. But then Stephanie's boyfriend, Coy Hubbard, heard Sylvia had started the rumor. He came over and he physically attacked Sylvia. He slammed her head into the wall. He was punching her. He flipped her over his shoulder. And then Gertrude comes to find out what's going on, and she joins in and beats Sylvia for starting the rumor. Some reports said she had never started any rumors. Some reports said that she'd started them because she was upset about what was going on at home. I have no idea which is true. Paula actually broke her wrist while beating Sylvia in the face one day. She had focused the beating on her face. And people, if you don't know, that's one of the things you learn when you look into real fighting. You punch somebody in the face, you're more likely to break your own bones. Your skull is very solid for a reason. So she blamed Sylvia for injury, and once it was plaster casted, she used the cast to beat her. And she walked around bragging. Here's the thing about Paula. She was on the school bus bragging about beating Sylvia all the time. She told the neighbors at one point, I'll say that later, like, she was just telling everybody she was so proud of what she was doing to this girl. Coy Hubbard and Randy Lepper continued bringing friends over. It became a pastime for the neighborhood kids to brutalize Sylvia, with the Baniszewski siblings joining in, as well as Gertrude, the mom. They would practice judo on her, so she was basically their dummy to do kicks on and all of that.
A punching bag.
Yep, burn her with cigarettes, cut her, beat her, and a lot was focused on her genitals, which Gertrude was the one aiming those at them. It was the whole slut thing. I just want to remind everybody that this was a church family. Gertrude enjoyed having everyone join in on the torture, and she often did it in front of an audience. Her 15-year-old daughter, Stephanie, tried to defend her friend at times. Stephanie's kind of a mixed bag. So it does say that she occasionally took part in it, but there's really no major stories about her being cruel. There are some stories about her trying to stop it. So I just don't know. I would like to believe that she really didn't want to take part in it. At one point, when Stephanie tried to defend her friend, Gertrude used matches to burn Sylvia's fingers repeatedly, then beat her with a thick belt. She actually had, one of the men she was married to had been a police officer, and he had a very thick police-issued belt, and she still had that belt, and she used it. Gertrude also threatened Jenny, Sylvia's sister, if she didn't join in. She was making Jenny harm her sister as well. Paula and Gertrude were able to ramp up their abuse of Sylvia when Gertrude stopped allowing Sylvia to go to school. No one to see the marks, right? Not that they did anything about it. They would choke her, bludgeon her, force her to take scalding baths where they would slam her head into the tub to bring her back around when she passed out because of the scalding, burning water.
Oh my God.
Both Sylvia and Jenny were terrified of reprisals if they told. Their parents actually did visit them a couple times. I think the prison term was very short, but then the mom went and joined to work. But Gertrude was always in the room, so there was no way for the girls to talk without her being there, so they did not tell. On 2 separate outings to the park, they ran into their older sister, Diana, who was 18. They told Diana that Sylvia was being starved and beaten. Diana thought they were exaggerating, maybe because they just didn't like it at the house. She couldn't see the marks. But she did bring a sandwich for her sister. And then she thought, I need to check this out. She went and tried to visit the Baniszewski home to check up on her sisters. And Gertrude would not allow her to enter the house and actually told her that her parents had said that she wasn't allowed to visit her sisters. But she had no choice. She couldn't get in. In terms of interventions, a lot of people failed these girls dismally. And I'm going to call them out by name for the ones I have a name for. I will say that a father of one of the boys, who was one of the ones who was briefly picked up for these crimes later, his name was Michael Monroe, the boys. One of the fathers, he made an anonymous report to the high school about a girl in the Baniszewski household being covered with sores. So I don't know if he'd actually seen her or if his son said something or what. But so the high school sent their nurse out to the home to check on the sores. But Gertrude didn't let her in, and she said, well, Sylvia ran away. She's a bad influence on my kids. She's whoring around. She's prostituting herself. Like, this was her big thing. She just hated her so much that she was a whore. When they were doing those scalding hot baths, they said they were washing the sin out of her. They were cleansing her.
Good God.
So the nurse just went, oh, okay, and left. Like, what? If you're sent to check on this shit, you say, well, can I come in and just verify that she's not, something. And then if she won't let you, then you think, there's something weird. I'm going to call the police.
Mm-hmm. Or you verify. You don't.
If I had that nurse's name, I would give it to you. But I don't know. The neighbors, the Vermillions, witnessed Paula beating Sylvia, the 17-year-old, and did nothing, even after Paula bragged that she did this all the time to them. Also, their minister, Roy Julian, Baptist minister, Roy Julian, he's probably not even alive anymore, but if he is, I just want his name out there. He actually knew about the abuse, but because Gertrude had told him that Sylvia was sexually inappropriate and was prostituting herself, he felt the treatment was justified to punish her for it. Finally, Diana, the older sister, after not being allowed into the house, did contact a social worker. Like, she tried. She was 18, though, just to be clear. She didn't have a lot of gusto, but I don't know if she told her parents or if she could even contact them at the time. I don't know. If you're traveling with a carnival in the 60s,
there are no cell phones.
Right. So the social worker contacted Gertrude. As far as I could tell, it was just by phone.
Oh.
And of course, Gertrude was like, oh yeah, well, Sylvia has sores because she's just filthy and she has poor hygiene. So yes, there are some sores, she told her, because that had come up too, because her sister had seen a couple of them. And anyway, she's run away and, she's out gallivanting with boys. So once more, the social worker didn't even show up. Never met Sylvia. Closed the case. The Likens last visited their daughters in early October. It was like single digit, October 4th, something like that. After their visit, the torture escalated. Sylvia had become incontinent by this point due to the torture. It would be shown her kidneys were just destroyed. So she was tied up in the basement, sometimes with her feet barely touching the floor. So they would tie her to the side of the steps down there and just high enough that her feet couldn't touch the floor. They burned her with matches and cigarettes, beat her, sliced her up, fed her feces from Gertrude's youngest child's diaper, gagged her, repeatedly would let her go and have her go up the steps, and so that one at the top could shove her down them. So she would fall down the steps, and occasionally still put her in scalding water, I'm sure because she was wetting herself and defecating, and so they'd throw her in there to clean her every little once in a while because I'm sure they didn't like the smell and how unpleasant for them. Gertrude encouraged the neighborhood kids and her own kids to increase their brutality. She would tell them Sylvia was saying awful things about them. She was egging these kids on. This is what's so disturbing to me, that a woman could get this enraged at a 16-year-old girl who, by all accounts, she was doing her chores. Do anything. She was going to school. She was not.
She went to church with them.
Yes. And then that these kids could be so easily swayed by a mother figure, which is probably part of that. If all the kids came to her house, she was the neighborhood mom, right? I mean, we all know that household. We have been that household, So, but I still find it disturbing. Some of them were, 17-year-old Paula, old enough to know better if she didn't hate the girl too. They would physically harm her, then rub salt into the wounds is what they started doing, including the burns. At this point, they were openly mutilating her body, and she had ceased to be able to fight back. She was incredibly weak. Bear in mind, she still wasn't eating except for occasionally, and they were hardly giving her water, so she was insanely dehydrated. On October 23rd, Gertrude brought Sylvia up to the kitchen and used a heated needle to carve "I'm a prostitute and proud of it" into her abdomen. She wasn't having a lot of luck. She had written it on there first and then was tracing, like a stencil. And she wasn't having much luck, so she got 14-year-old Richard Hobbs to finish doing it. Once he was done, he and Shirley Banaszewski, who was 10, took her back downstairs and tried to burn an S under her breast with a heated anchor bolt. And instead, I'm not going to post, there are pictures. There are crime scene pictures of her body on the mattress and all that. I will not post those. There is one that I may post. I'm debating. It is autopsy photo of just her torso under her breast, so there's nothing like that. Okay. And it shows this writing. And so this S they tried to make, they screwed up, and it ended up looking like a 3. But you can see this carved into her. Gertrude waited until some of the neighborhood kids were around, and then forced Sylvia to show everyone the writing she'd gotten, said she'd gotten it at a sex party. At this point, Sylvia told her sister, "Jenny, I know you don't want me to die, but I'm going to die. I can tell it." Gertrude, possibly realizing she'd taken this too far to ever go back. I mean, duh. What did she think was going to happen at the end of this? Started planning how to get rid of Sylvia. First, she forced her to write a letter. that she, said to her, and then the girl had to write it down, stating that she'd had sexual relations with a bunch of the neighborhood boys and that they tortured her afterwards. Covering everything, right?
Yeah.
Then she plotted with her son, John Jr., who was 12, to take her out into the woods and leave her to die. She intended to make it look like Sylvia had run away and gone to whore it up with the boys, and then they had basically killed her, which, I mean, these boys joining in with this didn't even know that she was going to frame them for it, right? I mean, it's not a full frame because they were doing it, but once Sylvia wrote the letter, she was tied up in the basement again and force-fed some crackers because she didn't want them. And first, if you're dehydrated, crackers, so dry, you can't. She couldn't. And so that just made him mad. And so Gertrude and John Jr. beat her around the abdomen and stomach for whatever reason, focusing there. And bear in mind, she had also just had stuff carved and burned into that area. Sylvia had overheard the plan, and she tried to escape the house on October 25th. She was too weak, though, and she did make it upstairs because they weren't even tying her up anymore. That's how
weak she was.
Destroyed she was. She didn't even make it to the front door. And then, this is so weird that Gertrude was suddenly doing this. Some people called it small acts of kindness. I don't think so. I think she was just trying to keep her alive long enough to figure out how to finish her off. But Gertrude then tried to feed her some toast. Again, something dry when she's dehydrated and has no saliva. So she couldn't eat the toast. And then she got beaten with a curtain rod because Gertrude was mad about it. And then Gertrude handed the curtain rod off to Coy Hubbard, one of the young men, and he beat her. Apparently he just hit her the last time, but he put her into unconsciousness. And by this time, the curtain rod was all bent up. They dumped her in the basement and left her. That night, Sylvia screamed and hit the wall with a spade until 3 a.m. She probably knew at this point, she had to feel that this was it. Neighbors did hear, when they were interviewed later, said they didn't call the police because the noise stopped eventually. And apparently it wasn't the first time she'd done that, and it wasn't the first time they'd heard it. So all those neighbors failed too. Sorry, the only name I have is the Vermillions. I will say that this house was on the side, it was on the corner. So there was only one house directly next to it, and I don't know about behind it. October 26th dawned with Sylvia no longer able to speak actual, words that could be understood for the most part, or to be able to walk or use her hands. Gertrude dragged her upstairs, propped her up against a wall, and tried to feed her a donut and milk. But Sylvia couldn't get the glass to her mouth, so when she dropped the glass, well, Gertrude was super pissed off about it, so she pushed her to the floor out of frustration, then put her back in the basement. The trial, later that day, Gertrude, Paula, John, Richard Hobbs, Randy Lepper, and others spent the day threatening and injuring Sylvia, even though she at this point was barely human, right? A hose was brought in from a neighbor's house and used to wash her off because she had defecated. Shocking. They gave her a rotten pear to eat, so it would have been soft, but she wasn't able to do it, and she said something to them about her teeth being too loose, and she couldn't bite into it. And what happens with malnutrition and all of that.
Your teeth get loose.
Yeah. No longer tied up, Sylvia tried one more time to escape. She got to the bottom of the basement stairs. That's how far she got.
Oh, God.
And then Gertrude walked up to her and stomped on her head. At 5:30 p.m., Richard Hobbs went into the basement and found Stephanie holding Sylvia and sobbing. Stephanie got him to help her give Sylvia an actual bath, not a scalding hot bath, and to dress her in clean clothing. They placed her body on a mattress in an upstairs bedroom, where Sylvia said, "I wish Daddy was here." Those are the last real words she said. Then she stopped breathing. Stephanie tried to give her mouth to mouth, but she was gone, and Gertrude walked in while Stephanie was trying to do it and started screaming that she was faking it, and actually went and got a book and was beating the corpse with it because she said she was faking. When she realized Sylvia was well and truly dead, she panicked. She made Richard Hobbs go to a payphone and call it in, and when the police arrived, she handed them the letter that Sylvia had had to write.
Mm-hmm.
And she said she disappeared. She was off with these boys. And then when she came back, she was holding this letter and she was just covered in injuries. First of all, if you think about it forensically, you could tell some of these were older and some,
yeah.
So anyway, she wasn't smart, certainly. She said that she tried for hours to care for the girl before she died. Paula held a Bible and said the death was meant to happen. She basically weirdly proselytized. The children had been coached about what to say, and they did so. However, Jenny was able to get one of the cops aside just enough to whisper, "You get me out of here, and I'll tell you everything." Her sister. She made good on her promise when they got her out of the house. So thankfully the cop listened. You know? Because that could have gone a different way. Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, John, Coy Hubbard, and Richard Hobbs were arrested right away. In addition, Michael Monroe, he's the one I mentioned before, his father had made the anonymous call. Randy Lepper, Darlene McGuire, Judy Duke, and Anna Sisko were arrested as having taken part in some of the beatings and torture. But they were released. They were the younger ones, I think, that weren't in the family. And they were subpoenaed to be witnesses at the trial instead. It was felt they would be more valuable that way. The autopsy graphically showed the nature of the nightmare she'd endured. Her cause of death was subdural hematoma from a blow to the temple, which could have been from the curtain rod, most likely is what they're thinking, exacerbated by her obviously awful condition at the time of the injury. Quoted from Wikipedia, because it was just easier than changing words around to put in a different order. Quote, "The autopsy of Likens' body revealed she had suffered in excess of 150 separate wounds across her entire body, in addition to being extremely emaciated at the time of her death. The wounds themselves varied in location, nature, severity, and the stage of healing. Her injuries included burns, severe bruising, and extensive muscle and nerve damage. Her vaginal cavity was almost swollen shut. Moreover, all of Likens' fingernails were broken backwards, and most of the external layers of skin upon the child's face, breasts, neck, and right knee had peeled or receded. In her death throes, Likens had evidently bitten through her lips, partially severing sections of them from her face." End quote. More than 100 people showed up for her funeral in her birth city of Lebanon. Ultimately, I just want to know where they all were when she was being beaten.
I was like, really? You showed up for her funeral, but you didn't show up for her life.
No. And I will say she was in the Banashevsky house, I believe, was in Indianapolis. I don't know how far that is from Lebanon. Ultimately, Stephanie was released and she agreed to testify against the others. Those found competent to stand trial were Gertrude, Paula, John Jr., Richard Hobbs, and Coy Hubbard. They would have been the older ones. They were tried together April 18th, 1966. Prosecution announced they were seeking the death penalty. Gertrude pled not guilty by reason of insanity. She said she had a lot of depression issues, and that's why it had happened. The others claimed they'd been threatened and coerced by Gertrude to commit their crimes, which isn't fully wrong, but they were enjoying it. Bullshit. The trial lasted 17 days. The jury deliberated for 8 hours, and on May 19th, 1966, Gertrude was found guilty of first-degree murder, Paula of second-degree murder, and the 3 males of manslaughter. Gertrude and her kids cried and held each other in court, which just pissed me the fuck off, because fuck you. They didn't care when she was crying or when she was so dehydrated that they stated on the stand that she couldn't even produce tears anymore when they were torturing her. Gertrude and Paula were sentenced to life. The others were given 2 to 21 years. In September 1970, Gertrude and Paula successfully got their convictions reversed due to a prejudicial trial. Their attorneys had tried to change to a different area because it was in the news so much. It had been rejected. They had tried to get it so they weren't all being tried together, but it was felt that trying them together made sense because the death had been completed by things happening from each of these various people.
Right.
So in part, they felt that it wouldn't be a fair trial because if you just did these parts of it, you weren't responsible for the death. But altogether, they were. So upon being retried, Paula pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter and got 2 to 20 years. 17-year-old Paula, who was one of her worst abusers, got 2 to 20 years. She tried to escape twice and yet was still released in 1972. She changed her name to Paula Pace and got a job working for a school counselor. Her real identity was discovered in 2012. I believe she got that school counselor job in the 90s. So that was a long time for her to be working with kids. She's married and has 2 children. The child she was pregnant with during her torture of Sylvia, I feel like the mom was taking out her upset about her daughter getting pregnant in high school on Sylvia because her calling Sylvia a slut and a whore and a prostitute, it was her daughter. Her daughter had gone out and had sex, but they were besties. Anyway, that child had been given up for adoption. Gertrude was convicted again of first-degree murder and still got life in prison. Annoyingly, she became a mother figure to younger women at the jail, and many called her mom. There was all this talk of how wonderful she was to the young woman in the jail. And I'm like, they can't have known what she did then. There's no way. She was paroled December 4th, 1985, despite a heavy pushback from residents of Indiana, and took the name Nadine Van Fossen. She claimed to be a devout Christian, which I'm like, duh, she was a devout Christian when she actually did the torture. So I just like that on record. Not sure why that was so important for like, oh, I'm a Christian now. But you were, sis.
Yeah.
You were a Christian when you did this. But it worked.
You claimed it
worked at the parole hearing. And literally, there were people just coming out of the woodwork. There were tens of thousands of signatures on petitions not to let her go. And the parole board was like, you're so wonderful, and you're a Christian, and you've been taking care of these girls. So, yeah, she got out. And by the way, at the parole hearing, she didn't deny having done anything to Sylvia. She just said, well, I don't remember it. I was on drugs. And I don't remember it. I'm very sorry for whatever might have happened to her. By the way, the only drugs I could find she was on were asthma medication. So, prison did nothing to rehabilitate this person. I cannot believe that the parole board let her out. If she had been a man, they wouldn't have in this circumstance. There's no way.
You know what I'm going to say?
What?
Pamela Smart is still in jail.
Yep. She died June 16th, 1990.
I hope slowly and painfully.
From lung cancer. I feel like that kind of sucks. My grandma died of that.
Lung cancer
I don't think
suck.
it's enough.
No. No, if she could have been on fire with lung cancer.
Yeah, that's way too long a life as far as I'm concerned. In the 60s, she was late 30s.
Yeah.
So she got another 25 years of life that she didn't deserve. Stephanie became a teacher and had children of her own. Her name is Stephanie Sarekstad, and she lives in Florida. Hobbs, Hubbard, and John Jr. were paroled February 27th, 1968, so served less than 2 years, as did Paula. The younger Banashevsky children were put in separate foster homes, then eventually returned to their father's custody. Marie died in June 2017 of natural causes. Dennis died in 2012. Richard Hobbs died of lung cancer in 72. He was 21. Here's the thing. I have a friend who lives in Indiana, and she talks about how bad the air is. The number of these people who died in their 40s and 50s of cancers, especially lung cancer, makes me think that there must have been an industrialized area near there. Like, I don't know much about Indianapolis.
I don't either.
But when I was reading through, like, they really didn't live long lives. Fucking Gertrude did. But the rest of them really... I'm telling you, 40s and low 50s for most of them when I was looking at their ages. Coy Hubbard was in and out of jail for the rest of his life and was actually brought up on charges of murder, but it's felt he didn't actually do it, and died June 2007 of a heart attack. John Jr. became a minister and a father of 3. He publicly stated, I will say he was the only one who said anything publicly about how wrong it was. And he publicly stated that they all should have received more punishment, longer punishment, more severe punishment. But he also stated he'd only hit Sylvia once, which is bullshit because on the stand, they were all calling each other out. He hit her more than once. He took part in stuff. Now he was, what did I say? He was like 12.
Right.
So he was on the younger end of the kids. But that still smacks to me of him denying his part in it. Whether he's making public statements that they should have been punished for or not, he's still denying how actively he took a part in that. And as a minister, that's bullshit. So it really pissed me off. He died in 2005 from diabetes. Randy Lepper had smirked. So he was one of the younger ones that they decided to just let come on and testify against the others. While he was on up there talking, he actually smirked while he said, yeah, I hit her I took part in at least 40 I hit her at least 40 times. But he smirked. Anyway, he never had actual charges pressed, even with that disgusting display, and he died in 2010. I don't know of what. Jenny got married and had 2 children, but she suffered trauma for the rest of her life. She was heavily reliant upon anti-anxiety and antidepressants, which imagine. Shit. Because, I mean, she was being hit. She just wasn't being tortured the same. She was still getting abused, and she's being made to abuse your sister.
Yeah.
When she loved her and she was close to her. So I hold nothing against her. There were people, I didn't want to go into all the court stuff because it would have taken forever. But
right.
There were different attorneys for different people. One of them represented two of them, but other than that, they each had their own. And at least one of them attacked Jenny when he was giving his closing statements. And he said, well, she could limp all the way to the park, but she couldn't defend her sister. He said that with her sitting in the courtroom. So she was attacked by the defense attorneys. Just adding to her trauma.
I hope.
And she was in court, by the way, for all this. She sat through this for her sister. So I hold no negative thoughts toward this girl. She was 15. She couldn't do anything about it. And if Sylvia didn't feel she could tell people about it when she was still in school and stuff like that, why should Jenny have felt any different? They were scared.
I hope that lawyer has eternal hemorrhoids.
I do too.
Bleeding hemorrhoids.
Jenny died in 2004 from a heart attack. She also did not have a long life. In 2015, older sister Diane and her husband, this was interesting, who were both diabetic, got lost in California in a remote area. Their son reported them missing when they didn't come home. They had been at a casinos or something, I think. When they were found, her husband had died, and she was in really bad shape. They had been surviving on rainwater and in California again, so I'm not sure how much that was.
Right.
And some leftovers they had in the car, but the problem is the leftovers, they had like a pie. Because they had bought a pie, but they were diabetic, and with nothing else, that wouldn't have been good.
No.
So they had been stranded for 2 weeks in the middle of nowhere because their car got bogged down, it said. And so they were just trapped, and they weren't near anywhere to get to help. And so, 2 weeks later, she did survive. I don't know if she's still alive or if she's dead. But that was an interesting story because it was an article I found later.
Right.
The house where Sylvia was tormented and murdered is now a church parking lot. The church was across the street, by the way. There was a movement to make it a memorial to Sylvia, but the church refused to do so and stated that Gertrude had found Jesus in prison, so they needed to leave her alone. Indiana adopted a mandated reporter law after Sylvia's death, and it's thought that this was a driving force behind it. The Sylvia's Child Advocacy Center is dedicated to Sylvia's memory. It's a nonprofit that fights for abused children. If anybody wants to look into that, donate, anything like that, it can be found at sylviascac.org.
We can put that on the...
Yes. We can put that on there for folks if you want to look into that. It did not start out that. They renamed it to pay tribute to her. There is now a new marble stone in tribute to her. But it upsets me whenever there's one of these stories.
Yeah.
She was let down by the neighbors who heard screaming and didn't do anything about it. The school nurse, the social worker, the pastor, the Baptist minister, whatever he is. And one of the things, her parents were at court too, and they were devastated because they felt it was their fault. They put her in the care of this woman. The woman had said, I'll take care of her I'll take care of them as if they're my own. I don't know how they could have missed the signs that the daughter wasn't okay, though, in early October. I don't know how they could have looked past that. She was dead 22 days after they visited the burns. I have looked at the photos of the crime scene. There's burns and sores up her little arms. She's so emaciated. And if they hadn't been feeding her since August, she was emaciated when the parents visited. What do you do? Look at her and go, oh gosh, maybe it was a growth spurt. Like, I don't know. So I do think that they bear some responsibility for it, but they couldn't have known that somebody was going to murder their child when they said they were going to take care of her. So that one I'm a little conflicted on, but yeah.
Oh, her poor sister. That poor girl and her poor sister. Yeah. I can't even imagine coming through something like that.
No. And she probably never laid a hand on her kids. She probably made sure they were well fed, just all the ways that trauma would have translated later. But yeah. And I feel like the older sister did what she could too. Yeah. Again, she was 18. She wasn't she was married. So she was an adult and everything, but she wouldn't have had the connections and the knowledge and
this was not something that would have been talked about back then.
No.
Reporting and what to look for.
Right.
And
Like now we have that, we can look online and go, what do I do if my neighbor child is being beaten? And she called the social worker. I mean, she contacted somebody.
Yeah, she thought she was doing what she needed to do.
I also don't hold anything against her. Could she have done more? Probably. But how do you find out what to do? I don't know if she went to the cops or not. I don't know if that's how she got connected to a social worker. So.
Oh God, that's just horrific.
Yes. So that one's a rough one. And of course, reading the fictionalized account, you're there. Okay. Again, Ketchum is a strong writer. You're there while they're doing these things.
I'm not going to read that.
Just I don't think you want to.
Not going to read that one.
But he has, you guys, if you don't want to read that, he has other excellent books.
Yes.
But he's worth checking out.
So, I'm going to talk about the werewolf murder, which is not any fucking happier than what. It's not as bad. In many respects, it is not as bad. But it's still a murder, and it's still family. Like, there's some fucked up people out there.
Yeah, there are.
So, we're going to start in Medicine Hat, which is not a garment. It is a Canadian city of about 63,000 people. It's in southeastern Alberta. And because nobody in the U.S. knows anything about anything outside of the U.S., it's about 100 miles north of Montana.
Yeah, it's above us. Here in Colorado.
It is actually the sunniest place in Canada.
It's where Banff is.
It is the sunniest place in Canada.
Really?
Yep. We're only going back in time as far as 2005. I'm going to give you this girl's name. It's Jasmine Richardson, but she's referred to in the Canadian press as JR. It's a legal issue. They are required to use the initial. They cannot use her name.
They do seem to cover for victims better than the American press.
Oh, she's not a victim.
Oh, she's bad. Okay.
But it's because of her age.
They are more responsible about the media, and I'm just thinking about that for victim name too when I was looking at the MMIW stuff.
Yes.
How they handled that.
So sometimes I will refer to her as Jasmine, or sometimes I'll refer to her as JR. But she was 11 years old, and she became interested in the goth lifestyle.
Listen, people, goth does not equal murderer.
No, it does not.
Just to be clear.
She started wearing all black, and her former classmates they were afraid of her. And I'm like, okay, 11 and 12-year-olds are fucking psychotic. They're nuts.
Oh, especially girls.
Yes. So I'm like, they're unreliable witnesses at the best of times. So I'm taking that part with a grain of salt. That she dressed that way, no, I'm sure she was experimenting.
Yeah. Yeah, I could go into a whole thing about girls making accusations against other girls.
Everyone at that age, I think, is awkward and suspicious of everything that's different. And they think everything is focused on them.
Yeah.
Just in general. So in January of 2006, when she was 12 years old, Jasmine met 23-year-old Jeremy Allen Stank. It's Steinke at a punk rock concert.
I should show you what Banachevix looks like.
Oh,
I just made up how I was saying it. So.
I mean, I just want to call him Stank or Stink, but I believe
just say it with confidence. We know how to do that.
It's Stank.
Stank.
Anyway, so in case you missed the important part in that sentence, because I got carried away, Jasmine is 12. He is 23.
Ugh.
And an unemployed high school dropout. You know, just a pearl. That's who you want your daughter hanging out with. So he's hitting on a 12-year-old girl. Not only did her parents object and forbid them to see each other, she was forbidden to see him. Even her friends were like, girl, no. They were all just fucking, no. Stop. He's ew. Stank claimed he liked to drink blood. There were several sources that said he would wear a small vial of blood on a chain around his neck. He said he once consumed sugar cookies made by a friend with so much blood in them, they were pink when they came out of the oven. Okay. Which, I'm going to tell you what that says to me. This guy is gullible with a giant G. I'm like...
And he's an edgelord.
Yeah. So his own mother said he was the victim of abuse by by his stepfather and her other lovers, and that he'd been on antidepressants and ADHD meds since his teens. He also claimed, and here's where it comes around, he also claimed to be a 300-year-old werewolf. That's why it got dubbed the werewolf murder.
Dude, it's not werewolves who live for hundreds of years.
I know that. I know that.
Come on, man.
I gotta say, though, researching this, reminded me that when I was probably, I want to say in 8th grade-ish, friend of mine, there was a girlfriend of mine, there was a guy in our school who was at least 2 years older, maybe 3. So if we were in 8th grade, he was a sophomore or a junior. I don't remember which. I don't remember exactly. And he had her wound completely around his finger. And let me tell you, it wasn't because he was a looker by any means.
They never are.
But he had this whole Dark Lord, satanic powers, gonna rule the earth thing going, and she fell for it hook, line, and sinker. And he tried that on me, and I was like, you're full of shit. I mean, I was so naive, it's like I had fallen off of a turnip truck. But even I was like, dude, no. Fuck.
Oh, I had friends who were vampires and yada, yada, yada then, so.
But I was just, it made me think of that, and I'm like, wow, this could have gone so differently. So anyway, this is directly from Wikipedia, that Stank and Jasmine both had accounts on the Vampire Freaks website and communicated. They messaged each other through there. In March, she, writing under the online alias Runaway Devil, told Stank, I hate them, so I have this plan. It begins with me killing them and ends with me living with you. Stank, replying as Soul Eater, responded, well, I love your plan, but we need to get a little more creative with, like, details and stuff.
With, like, details and stuff.
Okay. So, on April 22nd or 23rd of 2006.
I thought you've been distracted by your fingertips for a second because you were moving your left hand while you were talking, and then you, like, froze and looked. And I was like, wow.
I am easily
That's
distracted.
Supposed to be me.
Okay. April 22nd or 23rd. Stank and Jasmine watched the movie Natural Born Killers. And he bragged to his friends that he and his girlfriend were going to go on a similar spree. He also told an undercover police officer that he thought it was the best love story of all time.
I've heard that from people, like, when they're trying to act all badass, and I'm like, oh, stop. I worked at the theater when that came out. We saw quite a fun... People like to come tripping on acid, because that was how it was recommended you watch the movie.
Oh.
We got to deal with them.
All right. So whatever their inspiration, Jasmine called Stank to come to her house and help her sneak out. Now, I looked at a photo. I don't know if I will post it or not, because it's a very not interesting photo. It's a photo of the house. It looks like the Brady Bunch house. I mean, it's just a middle-class house in a nice neighborhood. It's not a palace. It's not a hovel. It's just firmly in the middle. So he snuck in, and he's dressed all in black and wearing a mask. Apparently what happens is the girl's mother encounters a masked intruder in her home and screams, as one does. I don't think you would scream, but you're like the only person, because you would be busy beating them to death.
I might make a choked startle noise, though.
She screamed, the dad comes running, and he tries to fight back. He's unsuccessful. So her parents are both killed. When the police arrived, they found that the mom, whose name was Deborah, she's 48 years old, she had been stabbed 12 times. The dad, Mark, who was 42, had a chance to fight back with a screwdriver, and they don't know, like, if his wife screamed, if he grabbed that. Mm-hmm. He did try to fight back, but at one point, apparently he stuck his thumb or his finger into Stank's eye because he had an injury there the next day. But he was found with 24 stab wounds, 8 or 9 of which were in his back. Jacob, the 8-year-old, was found in his bed with his throat slashed with bruising and 4 stab wounds. Now, what happened was a neighborhood kid was coming over to play with Jacob and saw the bodies. It doesn't sound like he went in the house. It sounds like he saw them through the window. That's horrific. Yeah. I can't even imagine. So he went home and told his parents. They called the police. The police came in, find this horrible scene. And apparently there was just fucking blood everywhere. There are bloody handprints on the walls, the whole 9 yards. And one of the cops really, it was Jacob that really did it for him. Because there were toys on the bed and the toys are covered in blood. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been debating doing a story that's kind of similar to this one.
So,
involves littles.
Oh.
Yeah.
So because Jasmine was not found with the family, the initial suspicion was that she'd been kidnapped or killed by the perpetrators as well. That was a very short-lived worry because she and Steinke were found and arrested the next day. I mean, they were stupid. They were out at a restaurant kissing and bragging about what they'd done. While Steinke was being transported in police custody, there was an undercover police officer traveling with him. Oh my God. Yeah, he couldn't keep his mouth shut. This guy is not any kind of mental giant. He bragged about the triple homicide. Me and my old lady have become legends. He also said that JR had slit her brother's throat with no reaction and had laughed about it the next day. Unclear whether that's completely true or not. He said she had a few screws loose. He said that Richardson's last word was, "Why?" the dad.
Well,
and that he had told him because your daughter wanted it this way.
Yeah.
So later reports.
I mean, they're failing to acknowledge that natural born killers, the father is sexually molesting the daughter that they do this to, you know, like.
Yeah. So later reports said that Jasmine, it's likely that she tried to strangle her little brother and stabbed him. And
the other guy
they think the other guy slit his throat, but they're not sure.
Okay.
They can't, there was a lot of blood all over. So they aren't sure.
Poor little guy. Can you imagine, like, your older sister doing this? You wouldn't understand why. No. 8 years old?
No.
You wouldn't understand this.
She reportedly killed him because they'd already killed the parents and she didn't want him to be an orphan.
So here's the annoying thing about it. You know how many times I've heard that excuse, though, for a killing of a child? They always come up with an excuse when they kill a child because they know that's what people are going to hold against them. So it's better for him to be tortured to death by his big sister
than be an orphan. To be alive and be an orphan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't make any sense. So later, Steinke claimed that in the hours before the murders, like that evening, I don't know the exact time frame, he had consumed a 2-4 of beer. I had to look that up. I'm like, what the fuck is a 2-4 of beer? Do you know?
No.
Oh, okay. It's a case. 24.
A 24.
A 2-4 of beer. I know.
Just say a case. It's so much easier than a 2-4 of beer.
Well, you know,
Speaking of which, I once found some 40s in the Natural Born Killers auditorium, and I was like, how did these people not clank all the way into the auditorium?
So, he also had a bottle of Vampire brand red wine and a gram of cocaine. So I'm thinking, I don't know that I believe him. I think it's bragging about how much he could consume. Because I asked a couple of people. I'll just tell you, I don't have any experience with cocaine. I never did coke. So I was like, I put out some discreet questions. I'm like, is a gram of cocaine a lot for one person to do, in an evening? And the answer was resounding. Yeah, that's a party for a weekend.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
you shared with your friends.
So I don't know that I believe that he did all that. And of course, the defense tried to use it as he didn't mean anything he said. He was bragging. He was incapacitated.
Insanity.
Well, but his friends testified that he tried to recruit them to help with the plan. And if they were hesitant, he threatened them, saying, if I do this and get caught and you didn't help me, I'm going to tell him you did. It's like, fuck. As it turns out, his friend Casey Lancaster, who was 19 at the time, was charged with being an accessory for driving them away and disposing of evidence. I believe she cleaned the car, cleaned the blood out. It was later plea bargained to an obstruction charge for Casey. By Canadian law, 12 is the youngest age at which one can be charged with a crime. If they are under the age of 14 when they committed the crime, they cannot be tried as an adult or sentenced to more than 10 years total.
Okay.
I would like the record to show that Shannon just rolled her eyes hard. I did too, when I first read this. So prosecution said the girl was seriously disturbed and showed no signs of guilt or remorse, accepted no responsibility for her role in the murders. She was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder, sentenced to 10 years, including 4 years in a psychiatric institution, followed by 4.5 years under conditional supervision in the community.
Okay.
Steinke was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 3 life sentences to be served concurrently with no parole option for 25 years, which means that he's eligible in 2033. This hasn't even come up yet. In 2012, he reportedly changed his name legally to Jackson May. May was his mother's family surname. In 2011, Jasmine began attending college while serving her sentence. In 2016, her sentence was completed and she was released from any court-ordered restrictions or condition. She's living her life in an undisclosed location and was, in court reports, was called a poster child for rehabilitation. Mm. Yeah, you believe that about as much as I do. I don't think either one of these people on their own would have done this. I think they goaded each other into it.
Yeah. And then continued egging each other on, through the process. Right?
They continued to correspond while they were both in prison. And he apparently asked her to marry him, and she said yes. Nobody knows, because she's now a private citizen. I'm going to assume that she has changed her name. I don't.
Of course. It always irritates me that they get to do that.
Yeah. But
you know what? You did it. Deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah, you did. So I do want to make a note about his mother. So she was aware, because she testified about the abuse. Mm-hmm. So she was aware that he was being abused by his stepfather and her other men that she was involved with.
His uncles.
Yes, his uncles. So she was unable to protect him or do anything about it or report it or stand up for him. But she was able to show up in court to hold a Bible and cry.
Oh, please.
I'm like, well, didn't you just do your duty? I'm sorry if
you didn't protect your child whatsoever. Exactly. And I get battered woman. I know, but I've seen so many of those battered women do what they can to protect their children.
Exactly.
Even if they're not protecting themselves. So I don't know. The Bible, it's like that Paula person. I'm surprised she didn't take the Bible up on the stand with her.
I was thinking about that while you were saying
that pisses me off so much. And I'm like, first of all, now you look like a double hypocrite. But it works sometimes, It works. And that's what kills me.
And she takes, she admits her responsibility for what happened, or she's taken and I'm like, 10 years. Wow. You brutally, you take part in, because like I said, I don't think either one of them is 100% responsible. It was something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you got 10 years and you're out and you get to have a whole new life.
Yeah. Nobody else, none of these people got to have lives.
No, I will say, I think it speaks to them. Her family, her extended family, has supported her during this. Even though she killed these people or took part in the killing, her extended family did support her, did visit her in prison. They got to read, some of the victim statements were read, and it was just for the sentencing. Mm. And her family blames him completely.
Of course they do, because then they don't have to blame her.
Yeah. And I'm like, that's no.
Now, she was younger than him, so he should take on more of the culpability.
Yes.
But she was also old enough to know right from wrong.
Yes. I mean, and a 23-year-old man and a 12-year-old girl. That's wrong. I don't blame her parents for going, oh, fuck no.
Right.
That's what they were doing what they were supposed to do. And how could they have prevented that? Who would even think of this, that this could happen?
Right. No parent. Well, there probably are some parents who think their kid's going to kill them any day. I'm sure there are some of those. But for the most part, no parent thinks, my kid went goth. Surely she will murder me now.
Yeah,
because a lot of people have gone goth and not murdered anybody.
And a lot
of girls have had older boyfriends. A lot.
Yes.
A lot.
And they don't kill people.
And haven't killed anybody.
But yeah, and I think especially girls that age, and at least it used to be mostly girls. I think now it can be girls and boys. But they reach a point where they do start dressing. Not all of them are goth, but they start experimenting and expressing themselves.
Right. As teenagers, that is such a time of change and tumult. And so you expect them to change things.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be like, oh, my kid just started wearing different clothes. Surely they're going to murder me now. Like, it's just, you expect that then.
Yeah, you expect them to come down the stairs and you just think to yourself, what the happy fuck is that? But you don't say it. You just say... You might say you need to cover those up or something, depending on what.
You cannot wear that shirt with holes where your boobs are.
No.
That's not going to happen.
No. If I can see your underwear, your skirt is too short to wear to school when you were 12. Sorry, that's just one of the rules in this household.
It's just the rule.
It's just a rule that you have to live by. So, but yeah, it just got so out of control. And the fact that it was called the werewolf murder, that's what originally caught my eye. Oh, the werewolf murder. I got to read this. And I'm like, yeah, that's just doesn't.
Yeah. It's funny, though, that, I mean, there's various murderers that they've called. The werewolf of Sacramento, the werewolf of this, the werewolf of Russia. I don't know.
Because he wore a vial of blood around his neck.
Yeah, did he? Something. Like, okay, so did Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie.
But that was each other's blood. That was love.
It was a werewolf love, apparently.
Apparently.
By these rules.
And it was funny because I did not say, I specifically did not say whether the parents, where they were found, because some of the newspapers said basement and some of them said first floor or ground floor. I'm like, was it in the basement or was it on the ground floor?
Which was it?
I'm like, y'all get your stories straight. So that's why I'm like, because I think it's got to be the first floor, because otherwise when the kid came over and looked in the window, how would he have seen them if they were in the basement?
Yeah. So otherwise he was a creeper and he was looking in basement windows, climbing down in window wells.
True. And an 8-year-old could be a creeper, but that's a little young.
It sounds from the way, I mean, it just sounds like it probably was the first floor, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
But since I read a couple of different things, I was just like, all right, I'm not going to be specific on that. So
you know what? I didn't name my sources.
I didn't either. So mine were Google Maps, Deadly Women Wiki, Murderpedia, the Calgary Herald, the New Zealand Herald, and Wikipedia.
Mine were Wikipedia, Caso Criminal article by Julianne Cunha, the Weekly View article by Al Hunter, Sylvia's Child Advocacy Center, Indianapolis Monthly article entitled Looking Back on Indiana's Most Infamous Crime 50 Years Later by Sam Stahl. So, woo! Doing my due diligence. Doing your due diligence. All right, guys.
So, well, we hope we've enlightened you. Now go out and do something good. Now that we've depressed you with the depravity of humanity.
Don't forget we're on Buy Me a Coffee.
Yes.
We're going to support the podcast. And what is it? Mayhem is what we're under.
Yes.
So if you feel so kind,
so inclined,
you can support us. Ours actually says buy us a book, but
true. Oh my God. If you bought us a book, we'd follow you anywhere.
My God. Have some food with you and it's all over for us. We'd get into your van.
A sandwich.
We'd come to see your puppies.
My God, a sandwich,
we would
a
take
puppy,
the
and
candy.
a book. We would knock each other down trying to get in the van faster.
Right. So now you know that. All right. Thanks for listening and your support.
Yes, thank you. We will talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.